Aloha, and welcome to this WOD on authentication and the cloud. So one of the things that you really want to do with credentials is not make them public, right? Otherwise, they don't really serve much of a function. And if you can turn your attention to the way that we were doing our credentials in the previous WOD, you can see that we were basically putting the username and the password string directly into the source code, and then committing that source code to GitHub. And GitHub is a public repository; anybody can go in and find this stuff. So basically, these credentials are worthless the way they're specified right now. So in this WOD, we want to get rid of that problem. It's not very hard to get rid of, and there's kind of a generic design pattern that you use for dealing with this. And the design pattern is that you put credentials into environment variables. So on your local workstation, you define some environment variables for the credentials that you're, or any other secret information that you want. And then your application reads the environment variables when it starts up in order to get that information. And so in the code here in our global module, we'll have some code that reads the environment variable rather than just having the stuff hard-coded in there. And then in Heroku or CloudBees or whatever, you have the ability to set in essentially the equivalent of environment variables in the cloud-based application. And so we can use that same strategy for local versus deployed applications. You can have different credentials for each location. It doesn't matter. So it's a nice way of dealing with this problem, and that's what we're going to explore in this WOD. Okay, so let's see. So we're going to use environment variables, and then the key thing is that we want to know, since we're moving to this environment variable thing, that ultimately somebody's going to forget to set the environment variables, or you might have bugs in your code that are introduced, and for some reason you don't get that data, and you really want some way to be able to verify that the application is actually seeing the credentials. And so what we want to implement in this WOD is the ability, if the application can't get the credentials out of the environment variables for whatever reason, then we want to display something in the user interface that comes up the first time indicating that there's a problem. Presumably the developer is going to see this right away and then fix it before it goes out to the users. You could think of another approach where you send a text message to the sysadmin or the developer instead of putting this into the user interface. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Okay, and then there's a couple different online references. The play has information about specifying configuration variables. This is the key thing you want to look at, basically this one right here, which is how in your application.conf file you can specify a configuration property as being the value of a particular environment variable, and then there's actually two ways you can do it. You can do it with this question mark or without the question mark. If you do it with the question mark, then what's going to happen is if it can't find the environment variable, then that property just doesn't exist. If you do not have that in there, then it's going to, at least on CloudBees, it's going to signal an error that it can't find it. So we're going to use this question mark approach in my solution. And then in CloudBees, you can go to this page here, and you can see that here's the bees config.set command right there, which is you give it the app ID, and then you give it the key and the value, and you basically just defined what you should think of as an environment variable, except in the cloud. Okay, and there's another couple little tricks that I'm not going to show you here. You'll have to just kind of find it, or you'll figure it out as you go through this. Let's get started. Okay, so we got to start the timer. And we have to create a branch of our digit system called Cloud Authentication 1. So I'll go here and say Cloud Authentication 1. Okay, and so now we're in there, and probably we want to do a clean compile run just in case. I don't know. Just make sure that you're all good. And I noticed this the last time I did this, that in fact you're going to see Eclipse kind of monitoring the file system and trying to rebuild the project and finding problems and then getting rid of them. Hopefully you're having the same happy experience with your Eclipse. At least if you're on a Mac, you hopefully are. Okay, and then we want to add a small change and go here and say starting WOD. And we can see committing to Cloud Authentication 1. That's good news. So we'll do this commit, and now we can define. So now we define two environment variables to hold the admin email and password. Okay, so actually I've already done this, but I'll go through almost everything I would have done just so I take up time. On a Mac, and this is it's going to be an operating system specific thing, but basically on a Mac to define two environment variables, what you're going to do is go into .profile, and then you'll do this export command, okay, which is export, and I'm going to define an environment variable called DigitsAdmin email, and I'm going to set that equal to admin@example.com, and then I'm going to define another one called DigitsAdmin password, and it's going to be defined equal to admin pass. Okay, so I'll type that into my profile, and then I'll exit, and then the next thing you're going to want to do is at least on on a Mac. Well, okay, I'll just show you I could have sourced the profile file, but another way to do it is just to create a new shell. It's kind of the nuclear option. And if we go to CD Projekt Hosting, GitHub, Digits. Okay, and then there's some operating specific. There's some way to get your environment variables. I forget on Windows what you do, but you do whatever it is to verify that in fact in your shell you now have your two environment variables defined. And so I just did a print env in the Mac, and then I piped that into a grep of digits just to see that I've got these two environment variables, DigitsAdmin email and DigitsAdmin password, set up correctly. Okay, so now at least we know that from the operating system perspective, we have our two environment variables that we need. Okay. And so the second, now what we have to do is we have to go into application.conf, okay, and what we're going to do is define admin credentials. That's a comment right there. And what we'll do is we'll call this admin, well, we'll call it digits actually. Digits.admin.email is going to be equal to digits admin email. Make sure, it's really good to spell these things correctly. I found that. And then digits admin password is digits admin password. Okay? So now what we're doing is in the application.conf, I'll say that up, we've just defined a play configuration property or variable called lowercase digits admin email, because that just kind of is the way it's doing the other ones. And the reason why these are uppercase is because that's just on the operating system how you define environment variables. It's the standard, so that's the way I'm doing it. Okay, there's no good reason why this is uppercase and that's lowercase other than just conforming to the style of the original. Okay, so we've defined these two admin credentials in the application.conf file. Okay, and now what we want to do, so that's good. Now we want to actually get that. So hopefully we'll have the environment variables defined in our operating system. Okay, and that we did that down here in the shell. And then in the application.conference file, we kind of asked the play environment to find those environment variables from the operating system, whatever kind of operating system it is. It deals with those operating system specific issues itself. And if it finds them, it's going to create these two configuration properties to take care of them. Okay. So the next step is we want to update our model. So the way that I think it's good to do this, is to say public, we're going to have something like add user info, but we're going to have it for public static void add admin info. And it's going to take the exact same. In fact, I think the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it that way. Whoops, darn it. Well, shoots. Trying to figure out the most efficient way to do it. I'm spending more time trying to figure out the most efficient way to do it than I'm trying to, than if I just type the darn thing in. But adds, defines, I'm going to say defines the admin account if the values are non-null. Okay, their name, their email, or null if not found, their password, or null if not found. Okay, and then we're going to say define, I'm going to call this define admin. And so we're going to say if email not equals null and password not equals null. Okay, so those two things are true. What we'd like to do is actually we'd like to have a private static Boolean called admin defined. And that's going to be false, okay, because by default the admin is not defined. But if we're passed in a non-null email and password, then we've got the data that we need to actually define an admin. So we're going to say admin defined equals true. And then what we can do is we can just call this add user info. And we'll call this guy the administrator. That'll be the guy's name. We could have actually set up an environmental variable with the administrator's name, but who cares? And then the second is the email, and the third parameter is the password. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty good. And we could, okay. And then the second thing we can do is we can say, and the second thing I guess we should do is we should have a public static Boolean, and we're going to need this in a second, which is called admin defined. And that's just going to return admin defined. Okay, and this indicates if this system has a defined admin account. True if admin defined. And by the way, I'm going to enable check style. Okay. All right, so now our model has the ability to define an admin account and to say whether the admin is counted. And in all other ways, the admin is just a regular user. Okay. All right, so that's this one, number 6. Okay, so now we want to update the global to read the configuration properties on startup and update the model with the administrator credentials if they exist. Okay, so now we're going to go here. All right, now this is where there's a little bit of magic. String admin email equals, and this is play.application. Sorry, play.application.configuration.getString, and then it's going to be that string in our application.conf. So for application emails, digits.admin.email. Okay, and that's just a little bit of, and we got to import that. So we're going to import play.play. Okay. So this is the code. You may have done a little bit of Googling to find it, but this is the way that you get in your own application, get the value of that property set in application.conf. Okay. So having done that, let's do that one more time and get the password out of there. And so now we've got our two things. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say user info db dot define admin. And the name of the admin. You know, it's funny. Let me just go back here for a second. I passed in the name, but then I didn't use it. And that just seems silly. So it's amazing that I didn't get an error. Anyway, okay, so we're going to say, here's where I'm going to just have a name, administrator, and then admin email, and then admin password. Okay, so now we've tried to define the administrator, but we basically don't know whether or not these strings have non-null values. Okay, so what we want to do now is we're going to go back to just defining a single, just context for one single person. But now we can say if user info db dot admin defined, okay, then let's do source, no, correct indentation, that'll work. Then what we'll do is we don't need this, we're going to define these for the administrator. So then we'll say that this is admin email and admin email. Okay? Okay, so now what you can see is that we've gotten rid of all credentials from our global class, because that was super bogus, and instead what we're doing is getting the email and the password from the application.conf file. That in turn is reading those values from environment variables. Okay? And so we get those values, and then if they exist, well, we call this function, which if these values are non-null, is going to actually define a user for this administrator. And then in this piece of code, we say if the admin is defined, then we'll define a couple of default contacts for that person. Okay? Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, the final piece of this is updating login to actually display an alert if the admin credentials are not available. Okay, so let's go over here to login. Okay, and this is pretty easy. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a little bit of Scala. We're going to say at if, and then not models.userinfodb.admin defined. And you're seeing like, whoa, this is crazy. We're just going to call like Java code in here. And that's right. So we're going to say, we're just going to call this. That's why I defined that Boolean back a couple minutes ago, is because I knew that I was going to want to call this within the template in order to figure out whether or not, when this template is executed, whether or not an admin is defined. And we always call this global function prior to trying to render anything. So we know that that code that attempts to define the admin user is going to be executed before we get around to trying to do this template. Okay. Notice I didn't, this is kind of crazy, I didn't pass this in through the parameters, okay? And partially that's just because it's a static function, and it's a globally defined function, but it does show kind of the flexibility of the Play framework, okay? Stylistically, maybe a little suspect, but I don't know. There's something about this that just feels like a reasonable way to go for me. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to say div class equals, and this is where you have to go, I guess what we should really show is go to alerts in our Bootstrap stuff, and you can see we want to get one of these guys, and this is what the code looks like. Div class, in fact, what the heck, let's just do a copy, and then paste, and then what should we say in here? Warning, admin credentials have not been defined. Okay. All right, so test our system locally. Okay, so let's do a run, and then let's load. Okay, oops, not quite yet. Okay, and we've got a problem. The application comp $sign that followed by. Okay, so anyway, application comp 6. Let's see what that was. Oh, right. These should be question marks, not $signs. Okay, so save that out, and let's rerun. Okay, we got digits, so that's good. The only problem is actually what we can do now, if we want, and we probably should, is let's remind ourselves what those silly. It was admin@example.com. So admin@example.com, and the password was admin pass. So we log in, and there. Okay, so we see we logged in as the admin. Everything's all good. So I think what would be a good thing to do is let's test for an error. So let's look for an environment variable that's not going to be there, and see if we get the right kind of error. So we'll save that out, and then we'll reload. Okay, and now we get our nice little error message: warning, admin credentials have not been defined. Okay, and if we make that one good and this one bad, theoretically we should see the same thing, and we do. Okay, and then finally let's make it perfect and reload, and it goes away. Okay, so we're tested locally. That took us about 18 minutes. Not too bad. And the next stage is we're going to deploy on CloudBees. Okay, so let's see how to do that. Well, let's go to CloudBees, and I'll show you a slightly different way to do this. We're going to log in. Okay, we're logged in. Let's go to Click Start. Okay, Click Start, we see the Play framework. Let's try to do it, and we could go through it the way that we did, I've showed you previously, with making the Click Start and so forth. But it was funny today when I went there, they didn't have the Play Click Start available. I sent email to the tech support at CloudBees. They said, "Oh my goodness, I just noticed that too. We'll fix it." So now it's back. But in the interim, I said, "Well, shoot, let's just try to make an app manually and see if we can do it." And it turned out that I could. So I'll show you how to do that. So this is one way you can kind of get around doing the Quick Start thing if you want. So let's call this thing digits. Okay, and we wait. It's going to be assembled and deployed to the cloud. And normally it says take too long. I'll take a little sip of water. Okay, so it's now running. Okay, and I don't know what configure. This doesn't. Okay, this is not anything interesting to us, but we go to this page anyway. What we now want to do is actually create a distribution. So we'll type dist. Okay, and now we're going to do a bees app:\deploy -d false. That's that false. That's that delta thing. So it's not going to try to do deltas, it's going to try to send the whole thing over. That was the first little hack they suggested to avoid that problem that I had during the last video. And then the next one that they suggested just today is to say for Play 2.2 applications, Java version equals 1.7. And then we can say -a Philip M. Johnson / digits -t Play 2. And then the actual file is target universal digits. Oh, shoots. I'm not in the right. Okay, sorry. I'm not at the command line. Darn it. Okay. Bees app deploy -d false -r Java version equals 1.7 -a Philip M. Johnson digits -t Play 2. Okay, now I'm going to get some completion. Target universal digits snapshot.zip. Okay. So, with any luck, we will now deploy this app that we've just built from our running locally system. And we're going to upload that into CloudBees to our newly created application called Digits. And the interesting thing you're going to see, we'll hopefully see, is the fact that since we haven't defined any environment variables in the cloud, we should notice the problem. So it's deploying. And there we go. Okay, so it's deployed, we think, we hope. So let's take this and let's paste it into the browser. And let's see what happens. Sweet. Okay, so it deployed. And furthermore, when it deployed, it didn't see any admin credentials, so we got our nice little message. Okay, so the final thing is that we want to fix this lack of credentials in the cloud, and for that we're going to use the bees config.set command. So we're going to say bees config :set -a Philip M. Johnson / digits. That's our our application, and then we provide digits admin email equals, and then what should we call it? Administrator at digits.com, whatever. Okay, so we'll do that, and we've got that defined, and then now we've got to make a new one for the password. So digits admin password equals foo. Okay? All right, so now we've got these things defined. Now we have to restart our application. And just going back here, so we did this bees config :set command. We verified that the alert was displayed. Then we did the bees config. Now we're going to do bees app restart. So let's try that. Bees app :restart. And it's going to ask for the application. And ask if we're really sure we want to do it. We're going to say yes. Okay, and then it's going to go do its special magic. And we have the pause that refreshes. Okay, so the application is restarted. So that would mean that if we go here and refresh, what we find is, what do you know? Okay, our error message went away, and now all we have to do is type in the credentials that we just defined, which in this case was administrator at digits.com. And the password for this guy was foo. And no, we don't want to do that. And there we are. Okay, we're administrator at digits.com in the cloud. And it's all good. Okay, so I think when you verify, push your enhanced code to your branch. So we've changed the global, the user info DB, the login, and application.conf. So we'll say finished WOD and committing sync. Okay, and there we go. Right about, let's call it 26 minutes for this WOD. And now you know how to keep your credentials secret.